The morning sun of Christmas Day rose pale and gentle over the small downtown street, but for Marisol Vega, it felt heavier than any winter night she had ever endured. She stood outside a modest corner cafe with numb fingers wrapped around a single crumpled dollar bill, the last piece of certainty she owned in a world that had slowly taken everything else. The festive lights strung across the cafe windows sparkled brightly in the daylight, mocking the emptiness she felt inside. Inside, families laughed over warm breakfast. Children pressed their faces to the glass pastry case, and the scent of pancakes drifted into the cold air, pulling her forward with a quiet desperation she could no longer ignore. This Christmas morning, she had $1 left, and a hunger that felt larger than pride. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Stories of Healing, because sometimes the smallest act of humanity can change everything. Marisol had never imagined her life would shrink to a single dollar. A year ago, she had a steady job at a clothing factory, a small rented apartment filled with secondhand furniture, and a quiet routine that made her feel safe. Then the factory shut down without warning, and with it disappeared the fragile stability she had spent years building. Bills piled up faster than opportunities, and each rejection let her chip away at her hope. She sold what little she owned to survive, moving from room to room, couch to couch, until even those options ran out. On this Christmas morning, she had slept on a bus bench beneath a weak winter sun, her stomach aching and her heart heavier than the cold. The cafe window displayed a simple sign advertising a Christmas special, pancakes for $1. It felt almost unreal, like a message meant only for her. She hesitated at the door, brushing back strands of dark hair tangled by the wind. Her reflection in the glass showed tired eyes and worn clothes, but beneath the exhaustion there was still a flicker of dignity she refused to lose. She stepped inside slowly, as though crossing into another world where warmth and laughter lived without her. The cafe buzzed with daytime cheer. Sunlight poured through wide windows, illuminating tables filled with families sharing breakfast before holiday gatherings. The clatter of plates and the gentle hum of music wrapped around her, making her feel both comforted and painfully out of place. She approached the counter with quiet steps and placed her last dollar on the polished surface, hoping her trembling hands would not betray how much this moment mattered. The cashier gave a small, kind smile, and for a brief second, Marisol felt seen rather than invisible. As she waited, she noticed a man standing a few feet behind her in line. He looked no wealthier than she felt, dressed in a simple jacket worn at the edges, with faint shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Beside him stood a small boy with bright, curious eyes and a knitted hat pulled down over his ears. The boy gazed at the pancakes being prepared with a mix of wonder and restraint, as though he had learned too early not to ask for too much. Marisol felt a quiet kinship with that expression, the shared understanding of wanting something simple and warm in a world that often refused to provide it. The cashier placed a plate of pancakes on the counter and slid it toward Marisol, but before she could reach for it, the man behind her stepped forward. His movement was gentle, almost hesitant, yet carried a quiet resolve that filled the space between them. Without fanfare or expectation, he asked the cashier to include her order with his own. The words were soft, but the meaning echoed loudly in Marisol's chest. She turned slightly, confused and embarrassed, unsure how to respond to a kindness she had not asked for and did not know how to repay. The man's expression held no pity, only a calm understanding shaped by his own struggles. His young son looked up at Marisol with an innocent smile, as though kindness were the most natural thing in the world. In that moment, the weight Marisol had carried for months began to shift. She realized she was not alone in hardship, nor alone in hope. The simple gesture of including her meal felt like a hand reaching to the darkness, reminding her that compassion still existed even in the smallest corners of life. They sat at separate tables near the window, the daylight warming their faces as they ate. Marisol savored each bite slowly, not just because she was hungry, but because the warmth of the pancakes felt like a promise that things could change. Across the cafe, the single father and his son shared their breakfast with quiet joy, their laughter soft and genuine. She watched them without staring, feeling a gentle stirring of strength return to her heart. When she finished, she noticed a folded piece of paper near her plate. It was not a grand gesture or an envelope filled with money. It was a simple note with the address of a local community center and a brief message encouraging her to visit, explaining that they help people find work and temporary shelter. The handwriting was careful and sincere. The man had already left, his son's laughter fading into bright daytime street, leaving behind a ripple of kindness that would travel far beyond that cafe. Marisol stepped outside into the midday sun with a note in her hand and a warmth in her chest she had not felt in months. The street looked different now, not because it had changed, but because she had. For the first time in a long while, she felt a quiet certainty that her story was not over. She walked toward the address on the paper with cautious hope, her steps growing steadier with each passing moment. Weeks later, that single note led to a part-time job at the community center's thrift shop. From there, she found a small room to rent and began rebuilding her life piece by piece. The memory of that Christmas morning stayed with her, not as a reminder of hardship, but as proof that one act of kindness could shift the direction of a life. She began volunteering at the cafe on weekends, quietly paying for meals of those who looked as lost as she once had, never seeking recognition, only passing forward the light she had received. As the next Christmas approached under a bright daytime sky, Marisol stood outside the same cafe, this time with a pocket full of small bills and a heart full of gratitude. She watched strangers enter and leave, wondering how many hidden stories moved quietly among them. Somewhere out there was a single father and a little boy who had changed her life with a simple gesture. She hoped they had found their own moments of peace and joy. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Stories of Healing, because every act of kindness deserves to be remembered and spread. Before we end, here is a special request. Tell us in a comment about a time when a stranger's kindness changed your life, or when you changed someone else's day with a simple act. Marisol's journey proved that hope can arrive in the quietest moments, wrapped not in grand miracles but in ordinary compassion. On a bright Christmas morning filled with sunlight and second chances, one shared plate of pancakes became the beginning of a new life, reminding us all that even when everything feels lost, kindness has the power to bring us back home.